Now for this little segment here, I'm not going to go entirely through Mounce chapter 15. He starts to preview some of the Greek material for verbs, and I really think that's a bit redundant because we're going to cover that in chapter 16. What I want to do, at least for chapter 15 material, is just go over a really quick review of English verbs and just talk a little bit about what we know, introduce a little bit of the Greek concepts behind Greek verbs, and then use some of the English grammar to try to encapsulate some of that. But then we'll go into chapter 16 and actually start talking about how to form present, active, indicative verb forms and how to use them. So first things first, when we talk about verbs, verbs can be characterized in terms of a number of features, two of which are the notions of person and number. Okay? Now, this can be a bit confusing because when we think about person refers to first, second, or third person, but then the word number, well, we might think that 1, 2, and 3 should apply to that as well because 1, 2, and 3 are in fact numbers, aren't they? But the word number, when we talk about grammar, just means singular versus plural. That's what we mean by number. So if I say, what number is that verb? Don't tell me first person, okay? That's not number. Number is singular versus plural. You can thank your lucky stars that we're not learning the most ancient forms of Greek because they had a dual number as well. Here we just have to deal with singular and plural. Now when it comes to person though, first, second, and third really are distinguishing, as we learned with our pronouns, the speaker from the addressee as the most fundamental and basic distinction that languages have. And then the third person is anybody outside of the first person and the second person. Our first person pronouns in English, that could be the subjects of verbs, are I and we. Okay, so I is speaker, right? We is the speaker and those associated with the speaker. So verbs in English don't really mark person. We rather have some simplistic forms in English, don't we? I mean, in Greek we mark them, but in English we don't. So I would say I speak and we speak, and the form of speak is the same either way. You speak and y'all speak. The form of speak is the same either way. But Greek is going to have some endings that distinguish these. The addressee will be second person. Okay? So first, second, you versus you or y'all or youans or you guys. And then third person is everybody outside of the speaker and addressee. And that is he, she, it, or they. In English, in the present tense, we at least have a different form for our third person singular, don't we? What do we do to third person singular verb forms in the present tense? You think about it for a minute. What do we do? You add an S. I love, you love, he, she, it loves with an S. We love, you love, they love. Okay? So one form for all the present tense except for third singular, we do add the S. All right. Now let's move on. In English, for to be, we actually do have different forms for first, second, and third person singular, right? So I am, you are, he is. On the plural side, we, you, and they, what do we use? Yeah, all of them use are, don't they? No distinctions among the plural forms. But at least we approximate Greek here where we have more than one or two forms, right? Okay. Now, let's talk, well, actually, let me just say this. So in English, at least for those third person forms, the third person singular subject has to have an agreeing verb form. If you don't add that S, it sounds funny, right? John speak Spanish. Doesn't sound right. It's John speaks Spanish. In Greek, the subjects, person and number, needs to match with the verbs person and number. All right, so we'll see examples of that as we start learning the present active indicative. Now, let's talk about tense here for a second. Tense has to do with where the verbal action is situated in time. What are our tense forms or tense categories in English? Well, we have present, which means that the action is happening contemporaneous with the speaker speaking. So if I tell you I am eating cheese balls, then I'm doing it right now as I say it, right? If I use the past tense, then the location and time is before the speaking. I ate cheese balls means right now I'm not eating them, but before I said that, I did. And future tense is sometime after the speaking, right? So I will eat cheese balls means I haven't done it in the past. I'm not doing it right now, but after I say it, it's going to happen. Okay, basically, same thing is true for Greek. All right, Greek has a tensed system, as does English, and we will situate things relative to the time of speaking, or writing, for that matter, I guess. Now, let's look at 15.8 in Mounce, and this is really the part where we start to get a little bit hairy. It's this matter of aspect. Aspect is a semantic category that has to do with how the verbal action is portrayed. A lot of people will say things like aspect refers to the nature of the verbal action. And I want to get away from that. Some people will also say aspect is how the speaker views the action. It's not so much how the speaker views the action, it's rather how the speaker chooses to portray the action for you, the reader or the hearer. All right? Let me give you some examples of what I mean. My son is JP. I just mentioned that he tore his ACL the other day. I could use these forms, all referring to things in the past. JP was playing basketball. JP played basketball. JP would play basketball on Fridays. These are all things that are past time, aren't they? Was playing, played, would play. Notice here that there is a distinction in these two forms. The first one has to do with not just being past, but progressive, right? I'm choosing to portray that action as being in process. JP was playing basketball when he tore his ACL, for example. On the other hand, if I just say JP played basketball, this is past, but I'm not construing it for you as, or you're not going to construe it as being in process, right? I'm just really giving you a simple summary, sort of snapshot view of the action. So just a simple holistic view. To say JP would play basketball on Fridays, that's past, isn't it? But that's not really telling you that it was in process. Rather, what am I saying here when I say JP would play basketball on Fridays? Well, not conditional. It's habitual, right? Habitual. Okay, let me give you another set of examples. I could say, I am playing tennis. And I can say, I play tennis. Both of those are present tense verb forms. I play tennis. I am playing tennis. One of them causes you to consider the action as being in the middle of happening. Which one does that? I am playing tennis. The other one is still a present tense verb, but it doesn't mean that I'm in the middle of doing it, does it? It means that I do it as a matter of habit, or it's my customary thing to do. What's your favorite sport? I play tennis. What are you doing right now? I am playing tennis. Okay, you see the difference? So I can choose to portray the action as being in progress. Okay, this is the author or the writer or the speaker's choice. So I may have engaged in an activity over a long period of time. I may have done it for a long process of time. But when I tell you about it, I might choose to portray it just as a simple summary statement, right? For example, think about this. When somebody embezzles money, do they do it frequently all at once, or do they do it bit by bit so that they don't get caught? Yeah, usually they do it bit by bit, right? So someone could be embezzling money for a long time, maybe for a few years, right? So as far as the actual action of embezzling goes, it might have happened over a long period of time. But a newspaper reporter could say, John Doe went to jail because he embezzled $5 million from his company. That writer has chosen the simple past action, even though the reality of it was that it happened over a long period of time, right? The writer could also say, John Doe was embezzling funds for 5 years when he was caught. And there he's choosing to portray the action from that progressive side. Okay? These are choices the speaker writer makes to portray the action, and that is the matter of aspect. And we're going to spend a bit of time talking about this as we go into the present tense, and then what's called the imperfect tense, and then the aorist tense. So I'll hold off on going into anything deeper than that, but just realize that this is a semantic choice the writer has. Okay, now voice. What is voice? Voice has to do with how the subject relates to the verbal activity. And I want to give you a couple of examples here. And first of all, we'll just talk about the difference between active, middle, and passive. Active voice refers to the subject performing the action. Okay, so if a verb is active voice, there is an agent who performs the action, and that agent is the subject. John swam. John is the subject. John did the swimming, right? Okay, passive voice. Let me skip over middle for a second. Passive voice is what's used when the subject is the patient of the verbal action. Now think about what a patient is. You go to the hospital, you get operated on. You're not doing anything as you're lying there, right? You're being cut open. You're very much passive. When we talk about the patient of an action, what we mean is that some agent performs the action on the patient. Okay? In the case of passive verbs, the subject is the patient of the verbal action. So I would say something like John hit the ball. John hit. John's the subject. John hit. That's active voice. I would then might characterize the action as the ball was hit. There I'm using a passive verb. The subject is the ball, but the ball's not hitting anything, right? Rather, some other agent hit the ball. Okay, so the ball was hit, subject, but doesn't do the action. The action's done to the subject. Now, middle voice, and this is the difficulty with learning Greek. English doesn't have a verbal form that is middle voice. We have active verb forms, we have passive verb forms, but we accomplish middle verb ideas or semantics not by using verb forms, but by basically choosing lexical items for verbs. And I'll give you an example here in just a minute. But in middle voice, the basic idea here is that the subject performs an action. So the subject's the agent, and participates in the results of the action in some way. Sometimes the subject performs the action on himself or herself. Okay. Sometimes the subject performs the action in his or her own interest, but not necessarily directly acting on himself or herself. Now I'm going to give you some examples here because we really have a hard time conceptualizing this. So active voice verb, I washed my cat. I'm the subject. I'm doing the washing, right? That's an active verb. My cat was washed. My cat is the subject. It's not acting on anyone. Rather, the cat is being acted upon. Not a happy cat either. I've never met a cat that liked to be washed. But look at the middle form. Okay, it's not really a form that's middle, but it's semantically middle. I bathed. Who's doing the bathing activity? I am. And am I affected by that activity as well? I am, right? That is the concept of middle voice. Now, Greek is going to have a middle voice form that's sometimes distinct from the active and the passive, and sometimes it's identical to the passive voice form. And then you'll have to put some thought into whether that's really a middle form or a passive form, okay? But I just want to make sure that we're getting the idea of voice here. Greek will have 3 voices. Greek verbs will. All right, that makes sense? Not asking if you like it, just does that make sense? Okay, good. Now, the last category here that we want to talk about as we talk about English verbs is mood. Greek verbs will have mood. English verbs have mood as well. Mood is another category that has to do with the action in terms of whether that action is being asserted, whether that action is being commanded, or what the status of that action has relative to the reality of situations. So when I use the indicative mood in English, that we might refer to that as the mood of assertion. Okay? The mood of assertion. If I say, for example, I eat chicken, okay? I'm making an assertion here, right? I'm just saying what is the case. I eat chicken. Imperative involves the speaker projecting his will for something to happen. Okay? If I'm a Chick-fil-A cow, I'm going to use the imperative every time I open my mouth. Eat more chicken. Okay? The word eat here is not in the indicative mood because I'm not telling you or asserting what is happening. I'm rather telling you to do something, right? So that's imperative mood. Subjunctive mood, this can be used at least in English in things like I will that he eat more chicken. Okay, I want you to notice what's just happened with my verb form. What is the normal way to say that some third person entity is in the process of doing this? I would say he eats, right? Moses eats chicken. I will that he eat more chicken. The subjunctive mood does have slightly different forms in English than the indicative mood does, okay? Third person singular forms, for example, don't have the S. Here's one more example. I would say I am in the indicative mood and he is, right? But if I wanted to say something like Mary wills that I blank early or on time, which form of the verb to be am I going to use here? Mary wills that I be early. Normally it's I am early if it's a statement of fact, right? That's indicative mood. I am early. But here Mary isn't saying that I am early. Mary is willing that I be early, right? I'm not early. This is something future to the time of speaking and it's contingent. I might be early, I might not. It's a matter of her desire, right? And I use English subjunctive mood for that. Yes? Yeah, so wishes, right? Yep. Yeah, so, yeah, exactly. If you're thinking of Spanish, you have that as well. Yep. Ojalá que, subjunctive, right? Yes. All right, very good.